Hello my dear friends, you're in the military summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to discuss the situation in the southwestern part of Ukraine in the Odessa region, where the Russians continue bombing and attacking the critical infrastructure of this territory. During the previous 12 hours we received lots of videos from the city by the name of Ismail. The sources are saying that the Russians attacked the territory of the city, more precisely the port infrastructure of the settlement, just with the purpose to destroy as many as possible vessels and infrastructure, not to allow the Ukrainians to get additional weapon for the next period of the special military operation of the war. So here we can see explosions on the territory of the settlement in the area of the port infrastructure. Furthermore, today we received a very interesting video from the settlement of Mayaki. I would like to remind you that the Russians were bombing and attacking this territory several days ago, and as a result of those attacks the Russians managed to destroy the bridge in this area, the Mayaki bridge. So I would like to remind you once again this video. Here we can see how vehicles were entering the bridge area. As you can see, the bridge was heavily damaged, and obviously it's unsafe to use this bridge in future. Maybe the Ukrainians have still possibilities to use the bridge, but obviously in months, in weeks, in 2 months, in 3 months, the bridge would be completely destroyed, and then Ukrainians will not be able to use this. So that is why the Ukrainians decided to bring additional bridges, pontoon bridges, ferries in this area. So this is the video that was published this morning on the 26th of December of 2025, and here we can see very high traffic through the pontoon bridge that was established by Ukrainians during the previous day. So this is the Mayaki bridge, and this is the pontoon bridge in this area. So we can say that Ukrainians managed to resolve this issue at least partially, but now obviously Russians will begin bombing and attacking the bridge as well. So from this area we have two videos. The first one was made, as you can see, during the day period of time, and this video was made during the night period of time. So the bridge is malfunctioning, Ukrainians are using the bridge, which means that the situation was more or less stabilized by Ukrainian side. A bit further in the northeastern direction, we received the report that the Russians attacked the settlement of Nikolaev. So locals report that power went out in places in the city and the fire broke out at the arrival site. So as you can see, the Russians are over-concentrated in this area. They started attacking this territory probably 2 weeks ago, and the Russians haven't stopped yet. Now let's discuss the situation in the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians during the previous 48 hours managed to achieve significant progress on the ground. First, let's talk about the western Zaporizhzhia direction. We are talking about the settlement of Stepnogorsk and the territory around. The Ukrainians are bombing and attacking positions of Russians where they try to concentrate their critical mass. In this video we can see the southern micro district of the city of Stepnogorsk and how Ukrainians were attacking a temporary deployment point of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this area. But all these attacks don't stop the Russians. The Russians continue offensive, and during the previous 48 hours the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. So this is the situation, for example, by the end of the 21st of December of 2025, and this is the beginning of the 26th of December. As you can see, the Russians improved their positions and managed to get as close as possible to the settlements of Nova Yakovlevka and Pavlovka. So Russians captured these fields, these 3 lines, fortifications, and the most important, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly along this dense network of the fortifications, which is a very important thing. Furthermore, the Russians continued advancing in the northern direction along the M18 road, and they managed to shorten the distance to the settlement of Veselyanka. So it seems that Ukrainians as of now are not going to slow down the Russians. Most likely Ukrainians will try to slow down, or at least even to stop the Russians along this yellow line, along this dense defense layer, which means that Russians most likely, without facing significant resistance from the Ukrainian side, would continue offensive operation further in the eastern direction, in the direction of the city of Orekhov. And according to the latest updates, we see that this is exactly what the Russians are doing right now. As for the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, during the previous 24 hours, we received significant reports. First of all, and the most important, is that the central part of the city of Gulyaipole most likely was completely captured by the armed force of the Russian Federation. Yesterday in the evening, pro-Russian sources published a video, I believe you have seen this video, where we can see how Russians were making searches, were investigating a headquarters of 102nd Territory Defense Brigade. So as you can see, there are computers, there are cell phones, there are some stamps, equipment. So as you can see, the 102nd Territory Defense Brigade, at least headquarters of one of its battalions, abandoned and withdrawn their positions without taking equipment. The Russians are saying that this is a very good, let's say, progress on the ground, and the Russians are saying that they will use this information, these maps, these computers, laptops, equipment, cell phones, to understand the current situation and what's the next. Obviously, the Russians managed to get lots of important information. So this is the first update, and these headquarters were captured by Russians exactly in the central part of the settlement. And a few hours later, right before I started making this video, we received another video, this time from the central part of the city of Gulyaipole. Here we can see how a Russian soldier was raising the Russian flag in this area. So this flag was raised right exactly the central part of the city of Gulyaipole, right exactly at this point. And based on these videos, you can see we haven't adjusted the map, because once again, the video was published right before I started making this video. So we will adjust the map, but telling the truth, we believe that we will adjust the map along the first Travnia Street, then in the northern direction till this micro district in the southern part of the settlement. So everything to the left and to the top of this red line would be colored as the territory and the complete control of the Russian forces. So these two delegations and these things are telling us that most likely the battle for the city of Gulyaipole is overing. Most likely before 2026 comes, the Russians will announce complete control. We believe that this is going to happen probably on the 29th or the 30th of December of 2025. So 1 or 2 days before the beginning of 2026. Furthermore, we have additional changes to the south of the settlement according to different pro-Russian sources, and we have adjustments in the northern part also according to different pro-Russian sources. Before moving further, let's compare the map between the dates. This is the situation by the end of the 21st of December of 25. This is the 23rd. This is even 22nd, the 23rd, 24th, 25th, and 26th of December. So as you can see, the map we adjusted the map, and currently Ukrainians control up to 30% of the settlement or even less. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the settlement by the name of Ternovata. This is a very important settlement. Everybody currently realizes the value of the settlement and what kind of things the Russians will be able to start doing when they take the settlement under complete control. And today we received this video. And here we can see how Russians began bombing the settlement with FABs and probably even with those flamethrower systems. So this video shows us, and this video tells us that Russians began storm operation on the settlement of Ternovata. So currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlement, and most likely the Russians in coming days or maybe hours, and maybe the Russians have already managed to do this, they're going to answer the settlement in coming maybe they have already done this. So the clashes are taking place for the village, and if Ukrainians lose control over the settlement of Ternovata and Kosovtseve, the Russians will be able to establish a very strong foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river of Gaichul, and as we discussed in the previous videos, this will open the Russians as direct strict way further in the western direction towards the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. We believe that after the end of the battle for the Gaichur river defense layer, the president of the Russian Federation will change his demands regarding peaceful settlement of the conflict. Now let's move further. As for the Mirnograd-Pokrovsk direction, during the previous 12 hours, we received lots of important videos. The first one is coming from the southern part of the settlement of Rodinska. Here we can see how 3 Ukrainian soldiers answered the settlement of Rodinska from the south. The Russians were controlling their movement. The Ukrainians answered a building in the southern part of the settlement, and then the Russians attacked the city with artillery and FABs and aviation. So this video shows us that Ukrainians began their counter-offensive operation, and currently Ukrainians probably control or are trying to establish control over the southern part of the settlement of Rodinska, which most likely they believe will allow them to unblock the rest of the contingent of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of Mirnograd, which still shows resistance to Russians. So as you can see, despite the fact that the settlement of Mirnograd is encircled, we haven't colored the territory of the settlement because we are still receiving reports that there are Ukrainians. Furthermore, we received 2 FPV drone attacks videos published by Ukrainian side. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in this area. So this attack confirms that this tree line is under control of Russian forces. We show this video and we discuss this video because these 2 videos, first of all, confirms the line of combat contact. So the current positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Furthermore, several pro-Russian sources stated that the territory between the settlement of Rodinska and the settlement of Dorozhnya is already under complete Russian control. We are talking about this part of railways, so this territory is already under control of Russians, and the Russians continue improving their positions further in the direction of the settlement by the name of Biletskaya. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Siversk. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes, the armed force of the Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Svятopokrovsk. This information was published yesterday and confirmed by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, but as you can see, as of the 25th of December, yesterday we didn't have even a single video that could confirm this. But today, pro-Ukrainian sources published 2 videos, at least 1 video with several episodes. Here we can see how Ukrainians were FPV droning and attacking Russian units and Russian forces right exactly at these 2 points. So we have a video that confirms that the edge positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation were located exactly at these 2 points, which means that most likely everything behind these territories were already taken by Russians. So we have proofs that indeed the Russians managed to walk through the settlement of Svятopokrovsk and to get the next settlement in this area, the settlement of Riznikovka. Furthermore, important update is coming from the area of MO3 roads. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 24th and this is the beginning of the 26th of December. The Russians, as you can see, according to this information, managed to improve their position significantly, and the most important, the Russians answered the settlements of Minkovka, Privili and Golubovka. Currently, there are very heavy clashes for this territory, and it seems that something like a very huge disaster is brewing in this direction, and the Russians are shortening the distance to the settlement of Alexandrovka too fast. I believe it's too fast. Ukrainians, they don't have enough of time to create additional defense layer around the Nikolaevska power plant. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Kupiansk, where most likely the Russians were forced to fall back under the pressure of the armed forces of Ukraine. Most likely Russians in coming days, months would be forced to regroup themselves and to restart the Kupiansk offensive operation, and this is going to be already the 5th or even the 6th battle for the city of Kupiansk. First 2 battles took place in 2022, then 2 more battles took place in 2025 when Russians attacked first, then Ukrainians counter-attacked. Now we are at the final phase of the 5th battle for the city of Kupiansk, when the Ukrainians are counter-attacking once again, a forced battle, and the next year we believe we're going to see the 5th and maybe even 6th battle for the city of Kupiansk, when Russians, after a short regrouping, will try to recapture lost positions. So according to neutral mappers, the Russians during the previous days lost lots of positions in the southern part, in the northwestern part of the city, and on the eastern part of the city, basically on the Russian side of the river Voskol. So furthermore, several mappers reported that Ukrainians managed to improve their positions even more significantly in the eastern direction towards the settlements of Stepova, Novoselovka, Kislyovka, Kotlarovka. We haven't adjusted this territory. We are still waiting for additional updates, but probably we will adjust these changes as well. So the territory of Kotlarovka, Kurilovka, Pishane would be recolored back under complete control of the armed forces of Ukraine, or at least we will color these territories as a gray zone. At the same time, Russians continue their offensive operation on the Sumy direction. During the previous hours, during the previous days, Russians managed to improve their position significantly. So these are the changes between the dates. The Russians, according to information we have, re-entered the settlement of Kindratovka from the north. The Russians re-entered the settlement of Andreevka, and the sources are saying that the Russians are about to capture the settlement completely. So we see that the Russians are recapturing the territories they lost during the Ukrainian summer and early autumn counter-offensive operation. So we see that both sides are fighting, and we see that currently it's something like a war of maneuvers and reserves. Furthermore, during the previous 12 hours, during the previous days, the Russians attacked the settlements and the energy infrastructure through the territory of Ukraine. We have this video published by Russian sources. Here we can see how Russians were attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine with drones, with ground drones. The Russians were attacking mainly the gas infrastructure in this area. So we can see that Russians continue attacking critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, logistic infrastructure, and of course the Russians continue bombing and attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine through the entire line of combat contact. At the same time, we start receiving more and more updates that Ukrainians and Ukraine is preparing itself before the beginning of the presidential elections. Tomorrow, the holding of elections and referendums during the war and the preparation of laws will be discussed. A working group of 60 people has been formed. That was stated by Deputy Speaker of the Rada Alexander Kamenko. At the same time, the Ukrainians are saying that Ukraine does not have resources to finance the elections. We should not do that. We have a deficit budget, so Ukrainians are trying to force European countries to pay for elections. At the same time, the candidates for possible president chair has begun their competition. We start receiving more and more updates, more and more dirty information about possible candidates for the presidency, for the chair of the president of Ukraine, and obviously this race is going to be interesting. And the most important thing, we still don't know whether the Ukrainians who are currently living on the territory of the Russian Federation and on the territory of the Donbass and Crimea, how these people are going to vote and whether these people will take part in these elections, because we are talking about 14 million of Ukrainians who are living on the territory of Russia and on the territories that are located in the southeastern part of Ukraine. So this is a very important question, and of course the answer to this question will resolve who exactly is going to be the next president of Ukraine. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.